Morning everyone, we're here at Victory Show again this year, doing the Chindit display again, as we have done in the past. Fire going, which is always good. I know I'm not going to get nearly as much filming done this weekend as I would like to. There's only 2 of us in kit manning the display, so getting away could be a little bit difficult to get around the show and film. But hopefully there'll be something of interest in this. So we'll start off with our display, and we're representing the Chindits again this year, as mentioned before. Fire on in the corner here, which is good. Using that to make tea. Weapons and webbing and so forth there, and of course the jungle hammocks as usual. Mine and Craig's, which work quite well in this little area. We've got oh yes, excuse the gunfire in the background, of course. Rather nice little setup with the woods as a backdrop here. Of course the radio setup as well down here. So yeah, nice little setup again, and as usual in the woods here, it's a really good setting for this sort of display. And I have talked about all this previously on previous videos looking at Victory Show, our displays at Victory Show, so I won't go into too much detail here. But we've got Craig's, I'd say Craig's jungle hammock, which is slightly earlier, I think 43, mine's 1944. And these were provided to the Chindits late on in their operations, initially to the wounded, and then increasingly they were provided to the men for use in place of the blankets and so forth. They've been using, carrying half a blanket and lying on the ground with that, having a hammock, much as it's a little bit more weight to carry. They were very popular because they do give you a much better night's rest. So yes, I think we'll go and get another brew on now. Go and get another Dixie full of water boiling on the fire. Make another brew. So to come back to the beginning of what I was filming before, we have here the unit insignia of the Chindits, painted for me by my friend David Bell-Hartley, who's appeared on the channel previously in some videos. He did a wonderful job painting this, and it is the unit insignia, so this was worn as a badge on the arm, and David's done a wonderful painted rendition of it here. And the creature we have on the left of this is the Chinthay, and they guard the pagodas, and that's what we have on the right, is a stylised pagoda roof in gold on a blue background. It's a very smart piece of insignia in my opinion, and obviously quite well recognisable and quite distinctive in that regard, and David did a wonderful job rendering this, and it makes a nice entrance piece for the display. It's just props on the tree in the front here with the display behind, so I think it works quite well when you're coming in. And it's a very nice thing to have. I'm looking forward to having space again to display these at home once the loft is done, which is another upcoming project. They'll be up on the wall in the loft. I have a 14th Army one as well that David made for me, and very, very pleased with these. They are a lovely thing to have and very good for displays like this. Certainly set things off a little bit. So I'm here with Tom and Brandon from the Japanese Reenactment Association, and they're going to run through some of the kit they have on display here, sort of as an adjunct to the Far East, the British Far East kit that we're displaying this weekend. So take it away, Tom.
Right. Well, with regards to kit, this is a typical Type 98 summer uniform. And they did have a winter version, obviously made out of wool, but for Burma, South Pacific, and China, this was what the standard kit was. So, over here, got the standard infantry rifle, the Type Arisaka Type 38, 6.5 caliber, based on the German Mauser. And that was your standard infantry rifle from 1905 to 1945, when the war ended. They did go for a larger caliber in 1939 with the Type 99 rifle. That was smaller. That was 7.7, which is the equivalent of British 303. Then we've got Type 89 grenade discharger, otherwise known as the knee mortar, although you do not fire it from the knee unless you want to smash your leg up. The idea was you put it down like that, put your grenade in, you pull the trigger and out it goes. Simple as that. And all the equipment was generally simple, very functional, not complicated or anything. Type 98 wool uniform. So that's what we had in more cold climates.
And that's basically just a wool version of the same cut as you're wearing, just made in this wool material as opposed to the cotton.
Yeah, Type 98 in the Japanese calendar, that's 1938 to us Westerners.
Yes, I was going to say their own date system, yes.
Yeah, it's a bit complicated, so normally it's for the period of the empires, I think, so that's how they do it. So. And then for NCOs and officers, you had what's called the Shingunto, which is translates as New Army Sword. This is standard issue for NCOs and officers. Generally, it's just a build equipment. You've got your belt, your water bottle, bread bag, which is just personal effects, maybe a few hand grenades, stuff like that.
I was going to say you're wearing, Brandon, you're wearing the leather equipment with the ammunition pouches and so forth. Could we have a look at that as well? Would that be okay?
Yep.
Scooch in here.
Two ammunition pouches, 30 in the front ones, and then 60 in the rear. You've got your little oil to do your oiling with. And then you've got your Type 30 bayonet, which was modelled on the British 1907 bayonet. Actually no, correction. British 1907 bayonet was modelled on this.
Yes.
Yeah, which was 1897. The Japanese did like their bayonets. And then, of course, you've got your puttees. So it's, and a typically one Japanese thing that no one else tended to do was put twists in. And that made it hook the leg better. And then,
and obviously we've got the boots there, and then I believe tabby.
Draw your attention to the tabby.
Yes.
It goes back to the days of the samurai. And someone had a brilliant idea of making it into a shoe. And then they issued it to the army, and it was perfect for jungle warfare. Rubber and canvas, so it dried out very quickly.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And then, of course, the leather boots, which they did have. So they, in the jungle, they would have rotted away in no time.
Very interesting hill plate as well, a 3/4 hill plate as compared to the German full hill plate.
Oh, there we go, yes. Yeah, I can see that there. Very interesting. And just to clarify, is all this, presumably all this stuff, barring maybe the swords and so forth, is reproduction?
Yeah.
Whereabouts do you get this stuff from? I presume there's companies who manufacture it in bulk, or do you have to order stuff specially?
I mean, the vast majority of the uniform comes from China.
Right. Unsurprisingly, yeah.
I mean, I'm wearing an original at the minute, only because it fits me better.
I see.
My winter stuff there is original.
Well, that's nice to know. We'll get a close-up of the cloth here, just to show the weave of the wool. You can see it's almost like a serge material. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed for that, guys. Very much appreciated. So yeah, a little review of the kit of the Japanese Reenactment Association here at Victory Show. Thank you very much.
All right.
So we're here with the American Infantry Association. This is Harry. And what exactly is the unit you're portraying here, Harry?
So today we are portraying the 1st Infantry, 1st Rangers.
Yes. You're going to run me through your display here and show some of the bits and pieces we've got on display.
So many people think of the 1st Range, when they think of the Rangers, they think of Pointe du Hoc, 2nd Rangers, with the famous diamond, Saving Private Ryan fame. This is the original iteration of them, with the Ranger scroll.
There we go, on the arm
that's
there.
the original insignia. So the Rangers, people think of them as special forces. They're not in special forces in the modern sense, even today. They're more akin to British commandos, a type of elite shock infantry. So they were trained by the commandos, and they were essentially trained to just have more self-determination, more firepower in their units. If their officers were dead, they wouldn't have to wait for orders. They could have the self-initiative to go forwards. So they were used whenever there was tough fortifications. But unlike special forces, they wouldn't really fight behind the lines, nor would they fight in small units. You're talking battalion size plus. So We have a bit of a display of just some of the smaller kit they have. As a group, we focus on the infantry, so we focus on the smaller items. So as you can see down here, we have some of the personal items. You've got your soap. The American Army had a special soap that was designed to do everything. So you can wash your clothes with it, wash yourself with it, shave with it, wash your hair with it, and even wash your eating utensils with it. It also works in salt water, unlike most soap. The other item we have is a plastic toothbrush. Now this is quite important because most toothbrushes of the period were wood or bone. Both materials are porous, which means they absorb more bacteria. When you brush, you bleed, you get gum infection, which means you can't eat, which means you can't fight. By going to a plastic toothbrush, the Americans cut out that issue by a substantial amount. It means you have more soldiers fighting. Again, you have your tooth powder, same as commercial stuff available, same as the British sort of stuff. Just mix it with water, makes a paste. Army issue shaving brush and a Gillette razor of the period. The Americans issued several razors, same as the Gillette one. This is a commercial one, but the military one was the same. However, they also issued straight razors and all different types. Gems were the main ones, but I have seen US issued Gillette razors which are exactly the same, and your brown Bakelite mirror. The US Army had some of the best small personal kit of any other military for the period. They put a lot of emphasis on it. The American society of 1941 was very similar to British society in 1914, and they had many of the similar issues that we had in the Boer War, where a lot of soldiers coming forward, a lot of volunteers coming forward were not healthy enough to serve. And so the first time an American child from Oklahoma, a 19-year-old from Oklahoma, saw a dentist was when he joined the army in 41. So there was a lot of health issues, so the Americans put a lot of emphasis on making sure that their soldiers were fit and healthy. The equipment we're wearing, again, they weren't special forces, so they wore basic infantry kit. However, they had more leeway in the way they tailor things. You see here, this is a shirt pocket. Most other groups do this, it'd be considered farb. However, the Rangers, because they had that leniency, because they had less control from high command, they had more independence. They went ahead and did this. You see some photos and they're just covered in extra pockets. They can carry more equipment. This here is the MECo pouch. This normally sits at the top of your rucksack and carries your mess tin. However, the Rangers, they brought them down to the side of the belt using suspender hooks, suspender clips onto the belt, and you can carry spare hand grenades. Because the Rangers, they had a big emphasis on firepower. In every other unit within the American military, besides the airborne, the Thompson was kept at a platoon level in a platoon armoury, not issued out like the Sten gun or MP40 was in German or British sections. Unlike the Rangers, however, who had Thompsons issued to them. You also had a higher number of 1911s and BARs. But other than that, most of the kit is pretty much standard issue. Do you want to have a look at general display?
Please.
Yeah, so this is nothing too specific. The time we were trained as Anzio in January 1944. However, we just have a photo, just some loose bits, rain capes. Right, I'll show you this. This is another item customization. As I said, the MECo pouch would usually sit here. However, since they took it off, they didn't require it. So instead, they used these eyelets and they put another Carlisle tin.
And that's the first aid pouch, of course.
So,
yes.
There's one up there. I'll just go grab that for you now.
First aid packet, rather,
Yes.
in the first aid pouch, yeah.
So it's all self-contained in a small tin. You've got sulfuric powder in there to kill any bacteria. That's the white stuff. So if you've ever seen Saving Private Ryan, and they're sprinkling on, that's what it is. And inside is your main Carlisle bandage. On your belt, this particular one is the 1918 pattern belt. It was made for the 1919 campaign, but was never actually issued because obviously it never went ahead. So these sat in war stock and they came out in the Second World War in Prefla. So you see a lot of these in use. First World War belt as well, and then later the 1928 belt. 1938 belt, which is got the smaller buckle on the end. Canteen is the 1910 with the metal cap, but this one in a later Second World War cover. And in each pocket you have 5 a side, so 10 pockets together. You carry one of these 8-round M-block clips. And again, as the Rangers were one of the first units to go over Europe, they had some of the earliest equipment, hence the World War I belt, World War I meat can, and they also had the full-length bayonets as opposed to the later cut-down ones. We have a Coleman stove over here. This is a commercial one from the period, but these were because the American Army didn't have enough at the start of the war. You can tell it's commercial by the lighter green. The wartime ones use the darker colour. It's a petrol stove, so inside the tank at the bottom is petrol, like you would in a car. Pump it to form pressure, light it, and then you've got a jet stove. It actually sounds like a V1, it's a literal jet. And that's carried in our loot in. And you would have
So the army purchased commercial ones.
Yes, exactly.
Because the issue ones they hadn't contracted for enough.
Exactly.
Yes, I see.
And speaking of private issue, I'll just go grab this quickly. Not private issue, commercial purchase. Something rather unique to the American military was that they could private purchase or issue buy from civilian contractors machine guns. This is 28 Thompson. This is a civilian weapon that was brought. Obviously originally made for the military in 1918, much like the belt due to the 1919 campaign. Obviously that never happened, so these went on to commercial sale. So a lot of success on the civilian markets with police forces and criminal organisations. And the post office, oddly enough, they were one of the first federal agencies to buy.
I've read that before, and it always amuses me.
They were still living in the days of the Wild West and needed these on all their freight trains to protect the pay packets. So when the American Army entered the war in '41, the only people who actually had these in stock were the Navy. The Marines had bought them for the Philippines. And the American Army, much like the British, didn't really have any machine guns. So they brought as many of these as they could. Again, as the Rangers wanted to go out, they had the civilian version, not the A1 that you would see in later iterations.
Yes, the later military contract examples, yes.
Exactly. You can tell it's a civilian one, fluted barrel, top charge and handle, rifle style sights, as opposed to the later sights, which is literally a bent piece of metal with a hole roughly in the middle. Cut compensator.
We're even getting sound effects for it as well, almost.
And the ability to take a drum magazine. The Americans never used the drum magazines. I've only seen one or two photos of them in use, and that's with biker troops. They didn't really like them. Most American soldiers in World War II had a 20-round magazine, and whereas you would see a lot of the 5-cell magazine pouches or 30-cell magazine pouches that you would buy from like SOF or even originals like these, they were actually very rarely used by the Americans. Again, Thompsons weren't issued to people, they were company stores and they were given out. So most soldiers had, I'm not sure where R1 has gone. No, you would have what's called a Thompson bag. It's just a small little bag with a strap, and then you can carry extra magazines in there. Since the Rangers were actually issued Thompsons, they received Thompson pouches. And most of the time they'd be the 20-round box magazines. However, the Rangers had 30-round magazines, but they were just coming out. And again, they had a big emphasis on fire superiority, so they carried more ammunition. But the drum mags were never used because they simply weren't reliable. Another new feature is the gas mask bag. Unfortunately, this doesn't have a gas mask in it, but this is the US Army training gas mask bag. It is not designed for field use, and the mask that goes inside is very similar to the British civilian gas mask, and not the civilian service gas mask, the civilian one with the Lou Perspex screen in it. It's very naff, to use a British word, very flimsy and will break. However, by this point the Americans simply didn't have enough kidney gas mask to issue. So they were issued with what was available, which was the training gas mask. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird impression. You don't see it done very often. People tend to do second Rangers, because that's what's most common and most easier. But this is one of those fun impressions where you can get away with stuff that you otherwise wouldn't. Oh, and another point, sorry. T on the helmet, you can see it on the gas mask bag as well. It's just an identification symbol. You see some battalions with other symbols. I can't remember what, so I won't say just in case I get it wrong, but there's some of the Zs on the back or on the pouches. It just just to help identify who you are. Again, if you're fighting, if you're pushing forwards, you might not always know where your friends are, especially with the velocity that the Rangers fought with. So you want to make sure that if you see someone from the back, you can easily identify them as your friend, and the T does that. So,
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Bye.
So this is Ludwig with Kampfgruppe Topf, who's going to be running us through, well, what they're portraying here this weekend, and run through, well, we'll then have a run through of some of the kit and so forth. So take it away, Ludwig.
Yeah, so this weekend at the Victory Show we are portraying men of the Panzergrenadier Division Feldherrnhalle, which is a largely unknown formation in sort of German Second World War reenacting in the UK, and actually more broadly everywhere in general. The Panzergrenadier Division Feldherrnhalle was formed in June 1943 from elements of the 60th Infantry Division, which had been destroyed at Stalingrad, and the Grenadier Regiment Feldherrnhalle, which is a army formation which had drawn many of its recruits from the Sturmabteilung, the SA. A lot of people don't know about the formation. There's a tendency to focus on the Waffen-SS and Großdeutschland. This is one of the named here formations that has largely escaped notice by reenactors and many historians as well, despite the fact that, as you can see here, all of the men wear the distinctive brown cuff title, bearing the inscription in a silver subtle script, Feldherrnhalle, in connection with the building in Munich, where Hitler's Munich Putsch in November 1923 was shot down beside the building. A particular SA formation after the Night of the Long Knives was named the SA Standarte Feldherrnhalle, and eventually fed recruits into the army, which led to the formation in a long sort of train of events to the Division Feldherrnhalle. And these men were fighting in Narva, in Vitebsk, and ultimately were destroyed for the first time during Army Group's destruction in Operation Bagration. As you can see here, you have a mix of kit. These guys are portraying the Schweres MG company. They've lost a lot of their heavy equipment. The division was very badly mauled during Operation Bagration. It was sent to attack beyond the Berezina to try and deflect the Soviets. That obviously was insanity. They then fell back to hold a bridgehead, which is what we're trying to portray this weekend. So these troops would be exhausted. All of their heavy equipment was gone for the most part. The convoys of vehicles were destroyed by overwhelming Soviet air power and artillery power as well. But we see here some riflemen supporting the MG. We see the MG gunner here with his MG34. They're sort of very common at this period, especially in Feldherrnhalle, the nets, the helmet nets. You see a lot of these in the pictures even when they're rebuilding the division after its destruction, and when they rebuilt it in August and September 1944 as well. Very common as well with the division because of its SA lineage, although you see this with a lot of German troops in general. The SA sports badge was ubiquitous. On top of that, it just adds to the connection to the SA, which the division fostered a great deal. So yeah, if you want to have a look in particular at the kit here.
So if you can run over the kit you're wearing, guys, obviously the machine gun kit would be interesting to talk about if that's possible.
So obviously I'm portraying a man of this particular formation, machine gunner. So the main armament, the MG34, obviously the precast to the MG42. Slower fire rate, more expensive to manufacture, but overall a lot better quality, and a lot wider use in the earlier stages of the war too. With that, I've got my tool pouch, which you would have the tools to unjam it to mount an aircraft sight on. Obviously next to that you'd have the secondary, the pistol, in case I need to abandon this at any point. Then every man will be supporting me by carrying my ammunition. So as you can see, ammunition cans, every man would have one or two of them distributing the ammo throughout the squad. So more for me to fire, because the entire German squad was built around the MG. The MG was the heart of the squad, so it was vital to keep it functioning and, you know, alive pretty much.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
And if one of the riflemen would be willing to run through their kit as well. Fantastic.
Yes, so I'm wearing the kit of a generic here rifleman in the later stages of the war, so 43 through 45. You've got your low boots, Gamarschen, M43 Keilhosen, so stirrup trousers, a later war model of tunic, so a lot more simplified to the M40 and the M36 tunics. Again, the brown cuff title. Then you've got all your basic leather equipment. You've got two pouches full of 60 rounds for the K98. You've got your style helm with your net. And then if I turn around to the back, you have got your gas mask tin, Zeltbahn, which is like a poncho or a shelter to sleep under. You've got a bread bag, canteen and mess kit, and that's just your basic light kit for your German infantrymen in Late World War II.
Fantastic, thank you very much indeed.
You may notice all of these infantrymen when here, despite being Panzergrenadiers, and you probably have some people questioning, you know, the Panzergrenadiers, why are they not wearing the traditional grass green that the Panzergrenadiers wore from 1942 onwards? Feldherrnhalle, along with certain other formations across Deutschland and, to my knowledge, Hermann Göring, were given the unique honour of retaining the white piping for infantry, despite being mechanised or, you know, motorised infantry as well. And that's why they still wear the white piping. Unfortunately, we don't have any examples here today, but aside from the cuff title as well, on the shoulder straps for enlisted men, you would sometimes see the Wolfsangel insignia for the division, which was embroidered onto the shoulder straps. For NCOs, it was sometimes worn as a metal sort of zinc cast, and you could find those as well. Unfortunately, mine fell off before the weekend, so I'm not wearing them. But we do have an additional area of insignia that you're sadly not seeing here today, but we do on our Facebook page, we do have some more pictures of that as well. So, you know, you've got a good idea of how the infantry looks, sort of the history of the division as well. You do see, as sort of Oberland pointed out, there is distinction in the different types of tunics, which represent the simplification of German war production. And you see this in everything as the war progressed for Germany, the desperate drive to sort of drive efficiency, to drive reduction of material. Ultimately, obviously, that had no impact on the end outcome of the war. But just by looking at an assembly of these men, you can, you know, the difference in tunics as you go
Losing
through them.
pleats off the pockets, squared off pocket flaps and so forth, the simplification, obviously the move from the jack boots, for want of a better term, but to the low boots and so forth, to cut down on the use of leather and so forth. Yeah, I can see it's a useful illustrative tool, having the different bits of kit on display.
Well, it is that thing that a lot of reenactors sort of think of a corporate image, but no such thing really exists. I mean, we look at pictures of the original division and they could be wearing any ensemble of tunics at any period. It just really depends on what they were issued and when. And also the sort of equipment and uniforms they inherited from their previous formations when the division was formed in June 1943, and then again in sort of August and September of 1944, because other units were drawn in to rebuild it. So it gives you an idea of the variety and you know, the sort of lack of this idea of regulation doesn't necessarily really exist in many ways for the German army. It is just it's quite all over the place in many ways.
That was very, very interesting. Thank you very much indeed for that. Most appreciated.
So I'm back home now, and as usual with these videos, I'll run through the various bits and pieces picked up at the weekend. I didn't really buy anything off the stalls or anything. These are bits and pieces people were bringing for me, and have either been very kindly gifted to me or were bits I'd otherwise bought which were being sort of delivered to me at the show. One of the items gifted to me, I will not be able to get it into shot as a whole, but I can at least show you the label here. This was gifted to me by a friend of mine, Neil Sylvester King, and Craig, the chap I was on the display with, very kindly brought this along with him for me, and it's, as you can see here, Macintosh Mans, RCMP Temperate Climate, so we believe it's Royal Corps of Military Police, and then RMA cadets and WOs, so Royal Military Academy cadets and warrant officers. And you can see here the 1970s contract number. The label is coming unglued from the lining of this, and the coat itself, the Macintosh itself, is not in the best condition. I'm going to make a video looking at this at some point going forward. An interesting piece of clothing I'd not seen previously, and it'll hopefully make an interesting video to have a look at this in some detail. So move that to one side here, out of the way. Another item very kindly gifted to me was this reproduction K-ration supper unit. Now these were of course used by the Chindit, so it's a very useful thing to have. I do have several repro boxes. I have a set of 3 repro K-rations with contents as well. But this is made by a chap in the UK who I'm going to get in contact with, get his details, and make a video reviewing this, basically, is the idea. Harry, who took us through the first Rangers display, or the kit and so forth of their display, gifted this to me, so thank you very much again, Harry. And as I say, this will be covered in a future video, hopefully in the not too distant future, looking at this and having a look at the contents. It is unopened at the moment, but obviously you have the waxed box within the outer cardboard sleeve, so we'll be opening that up on a future video to have a look at the contents. Another item gifted to me came from John Shanahan, who was nice to see again at the event, and he gave me this. This is a Royal Ulster Constabulary cap badge, the red backing, so So it just needs to do a little bit of work on the back here. It appears to have been glued onto a display board or something at some point. That'll clean up nicely. So very kind of you, John. Thank you very much indeed for this. Nice little addition to the insignia collection. One of the items I've purchased is a rather nice addition to the Far East kit, and that's an original anti-mosquito paste tin. So you can see that here. Not in bad condition overall, bit of surface rust on the lid. That will be a nice addition to what I'm hoping to put together a display in the cabinet at some point, which will probably feature in a future video of some Far East specific small kit, smaller items. So very pleased with that. That came from Alan Pryor. Thank you very much indeed, Alan, for that. And another item Alan brought along for me, which he'd picked up from someone else to pass on to me, is a very tidy 1944 pattern haversack, first pattern 1944 pattern haversack, basically unissued as far as I can see. You can see the nice clear stamp under the flap there as well. And this will feature going forward in probably very soon, maybe the next video after this, in a video looking at 1944 pattern haversacks. So very pleased with that. Thank you very much for bringing that along for me, Alan. And then another couple of items gifted to me, this time by my friend Peter, who was along as well. He gave me this, and this is a Canadian cap, part of the Bush uniform, and you can see inside here the very nice clear label. It's a small size, but it's a nice thing to have. See the date there, which I believe is 1953, and you can see caps, field, summer, olive drab in there. So nice thing to have. As I say, a very small size, too small for me, but a nice addition to the collection. I didn't have one of these in such nice condition previously, and it's an interesting design. Obviously all the ventilation eyelets and everything around there. Probably have a look at that at some point in the future, looking at the Canadian Bush uniform in more detail. And Peter also gifted me this, which is an orgy, as you can see. I'll open this out of the bag. I haven't had it out of the bag yet, so move this here. And this is as I remember, a civilian private purchase example. So if I open this up here, there we go, you can see. So it's Norwegian made, but obviously with a small sizing on the tag there, and made to be sold commercially. 100% Bommel, which means 100% cotton, I believe. You can see the manufacturer and various details on the label there. So that's a very nice thing to have, a 80s era private purchase, or private, well, obviously commercially produced Norgy shirt. So in a nice addition to that late Cold War era kit is a private purchase example of one of these. So very pleased with that as well. And that concludes the bits and pieces picked up at the weekend. So there we are. I hope you found that interesting. Not as much filming as I would like to have done. As said at the beginning, it's difficult, although the main aim of being there, of course, is to man the display, talk to people, partake in the reenacting. The filming is very much secondary, but still I would have liked to film a bit more. I was really restricted in terms of time available, and filming things in the woods close to our display was really all I could manage. But hopefully it's been of interest looking at those few displays I managed to get round to film. Also, thank you for those of you who dropped by and said hello. It was nice meeting people who know me from the channel. It was lovely bumping into so many people who came forward and said hello. So I hope you enjoyed the show as well. If you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more from the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as ever, a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, so I always say thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there as well. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.